And so the first and most important thing is decreasing, eliminating the clock changing, which decreases complexity. And then once we've got that stability, it won't be a patchwork. It'll just be, we know what time it is in Indiana because all of
Just the way we've accommodated it to with Arizona.
Exactly.
Right, and if we're honest, we, like you point, we already have these lines, and they do just fine.
Exactly.
With it. And so, just for the record, I'm a strong advocate to let my state do what they prefer to do, and feel like they know how to make those decisions best. I'm going to use just a little bit of time for actually a very interesting personal question, Dr. Johnson. Given all the effects that we've heard about, what's the likelihood that if somebody had a profession where they were moving across the country twice a week and changing time zones an hour or 2 hours or sometimes 3 hours, that they would be subject to those same problems?
So, a lot of us can relate to jet lag. One thing that happens with jet lag is you're moving to a new time where the sun is in the sky, and so we adjust to that. Within a day or two, we get to the new time zone, depending on how far we're going. What happens with going to permanent daylight savings time is we're changing the clock time, but we're not changing the sun. That's why there's this perpetual misalignment that has more stresses and harms to our body over the long run. So very frequent time travel with a lot of adjusts is a big strain on the body. But for most people that don't do it all the time, we do adjust within days, and we can get that better health and more misalignment or more alignment of our rhythms within days.
Unless within days you're going back to the previous time zone.
That is why the really frequent, not good.
All right, I think I've made my point. I'll yield to the ranking member.
Thank you to my fellow freshman and classmate, Senator Curtis, and also thank you to Senator Cantwell for the opportunity to be ranking member today. And I also want to thank the witnesses. This is one of the issues that a lot of times we will get messages from our constituents. People have strong opinions, and I was literally in a meeting before this with a CEO of a company who asked, well, what do you think? And so this is something that does touch on so many. And I want to start my questions with you, Dr. Harkey, because year-round daylight saving time would mean later sunrises in the mornings. More people may be commuting to work or to school in the dark. Some people have raised concerns that this would put their children at greater risk of being hit by cars while walking to school. Pedestrians are more likely to be killed in traffic accidents, as you stated, in the dark because it's harder for the drivers to see them. And in the 1970s, it was widely reported that mothers raised significant concerns about their children walking to school in the dark in the winter. Nationwide, over 70% of fatal accidents involving pedestrians occur at night. Dr. Harkey, no matter what time the sun goes down, what roadway improvements can cities and states make to reduce pedestrian fatalities?
Thank you for the question, Senator. That is exactly what our study indicated, is that it's not about the shifting of the time that we're going to have darkness, regardless of which decision you make, which policy decision you make. And so that's what we're looking for, is to try and figure out how do we make pedestrians and bicyclists in particular safer in those dark hours, whether they're in the morning or whether they're in the evening. And for most municipalities and county agencies and state DOTs who are struggling to address this issue, there's two key things. One is space. We have to provide the appropriate space, sidewalks. In rural areas that can be separated paths or possibly paved shoulders even. Places for people to walk where they're not in the edge of the travel lane. We also have to take care to provide careful crossings. So we have to pay particular attention to how we're allowing motor vehicles and pedestrians to interact at crosswalks. These can be at intersections, they can be at mid-block locations. So you have to have appropriate crossings. Pedestrians aren't going to walk too far. They're going to make those decisions to cross in the middle of the road sometimes. And so you want to make sure that you're providing adequate crossings where they want to cross. And then you've got to do all you can to provide the kinds of traffic control devices that will increase motorist yielding behavior. So this includes things like rapid flash beacons, which have been shown to increase motor shielding behavior sixfold. You can build on that, adding simple things like lights that are triggered when a pedestrian hits the crosswalk area. It will light up that crosswalk. You can double the amount of motor shielding behavior. So these are interventions that have been proven over time, and it's important for state agencies and local agencies to take advantage of those kinds of interventions and get those implemented anywhere that they have pedestrians.
Following along on the safety theme, what vehicle technologies can help protect pedestrians when it's difficult for drivers to see them?
Yeah, and so this is another important aspect, and this was what builds on the safe system approach, right? Building that redundancy into the systems. You don't just rely on the infrastructure, you also build technology into vehicles that can help with this. Two big things that we've studied. One is better headlights. We're the only group in the world that tests headlights the way that we do on our track. And so we've seen improvements in headlights over the years that increase visibility and provide drivers with additional time. They can see that pedestrian further down the roadway. And so that's a big change, and we'll continue to push for that. The other is automatic emergency braking with pedestrian detection. That also has been shown to work and be very effective at reducing pedestrian crashes in the daytime. And now our testing is really focused on getting automakers to improve those systems to work even better at nighttime. So that's an example of two technologies in the vehicle that can be really, really beneficial.
You know, one of the things that I've noticed is that our safety efforts are siloed. You have the Federal Highway Administration, which builds and maintains highways. You have the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, which regulates vehicle safety standards and investigates defects. Then you've got the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, which oversees commercial motor vehicles and trucking industry safety, all kind of working separately. And I think back to what you were talking about kind of how can we better layer safety measures to help stop deadly crashes?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And so build on top of the separation in the federal agencies that you just discussed. Along with them, you have state DOTs, you have county DOTs, you have city DOTs. And so it becomes quite the web of how you make decisions when it comes to road safety. One of the things that we have to do a better job of is communicating between those agencies deliberately. And so there is no single authority of the ones that you mentioned that has complete authority over every decision on our roadway system when it comes to safety. And so these agencies have to do a better job of communicating together deliberately, and not just at the executive level, but at the staff level. Because it's at the staff level where people know what interventions work best and how to apply those in a way that you create that redundancy in the system that we were talking about. So whether it's infrastructure, whether it's vehicle, whether it's changing behaviors, that communication amongst the staff is absolutely critical.
Great, thank you, and was really interested to hear about your 30 by 30. So in the interest of time, I will yield back to the chairman.
Thank you very much, and I want to thank each of the witnesses for being here on what is a very interesting topic, an important topic, and complex topic. There are very real and complicated issues and countervailing arguments on both sides. I think there is widespread agreement on locking the clock, but where to lock it. The reason we're holding these hearings is because these are real arguments, and they have real impacts on people. Let me start on the health side. Dr. Johnson, can you expand on the impact sleep deprivation has on our overall health, on our minds, our moods, and especially on young children for whom we know sleep is so vital?
Thank you for asking about that. Yeah, sleep comes, has different aspects. So one is just how much we sleep, but it's the quality of sleep and then the timing of sleep. So any disturbance in that can affect our, how we do. So we know that kids, even if over a whole week they get enough sleep, if they don't get enough during the week and catch up on the weekend, they still don't do as well. And So sleep and our circadian rhythms, they really regulate every aspect of our body, our metabolism. They affect how we think about things. They affect our choices of food. You're more likely to grab a celery stick when you're, got enough sleep, but grab that bagel or that, candy bar when you're sleep deprived. Athletic performance, we know, is better when people do sleep. Academic success in school. And then mental health has some of the most deep connections to sleep health. And that's why, even though people, feel better when they see light, it's that timing of light and our circadian rhythms that is so deeply intertwined that if we can improve sleep, if we can improve those rhythms, we see those lower rates of depression overall. We see lower rates of suicide. And that's what the data, there was just a new study that came out just last week showing 6% higher rates of depression when the sunrises are set later, when we lose that critical morning light. And this gets exponentially worse in the winter when you lose the light in the morning. So Texas and the southern states actually lose that morning light for a longer period because of the curve of the earth. The more even days, you get 3 to 4 months with it being dark after 8 a.m. And some of the darkest places in the country are actually in western Texas if we were to go to permanent daylight savings time. And that's why in 1974, a lot of the push to end our experiment with daylight savings time was actually pushed by states like Florida and Texas and the southern states.
Can you also explain why consistent sleep patterns are important for teen brain development and mental health?
Yeah, so again, this goes back to our circadian rhythms. And so when our circadian rhythms are working well, they help us anticipate our day. And so what I mean by that is we have certain times when our body wants to go to sleep. And so teenagers, their natural rhythm is later. If any of you have been around a teenager, you can't just say, go to bed. They're like, I'm wide awake. We have this, what we call a forbidden zone. Their alertness just is skyrocketing in that time before bed. And so they can't get to sleep on time, but if our social schedule is set an hour earlier, which is what daylight savings time does, they don't have that opportunity to get the amount of sleep they need, and they tend to switch back and forth on weekends, and that switching affects us. And so that then affects how our brain functions. We know more and more about sleep being important for clearing toxins from our brain, which sets us up for things like dementia, Parkinson's disease. I just came back from the Neuro conference with data pointing to the connections there. Our metabolism gets off, so we're more likely to gain weight. Again, even if people do exercise more, we see like 10% higher rates of obesity in places where the sun sets later. So sleep is so critically important for our metabolic health, our overall health, our mental health, how our brain functions, which affects the safety issues. The highway study, it found a higher risk of vehicle crashes even though it was light later. The effect of sleep is more powerful than almost anything else, and by aligning the sun, we can really help that.
So let's talk a little bit about the idea of states' rights. And I've heard from groups on both sides of this issue that want either permanent standard time or permanent daylight savings time. Almost everyone agrees that changing the clock twice a year doesn't make sense. Mr. Yates, in your opening statement, you said that setting the clock is fundamentally a states' rights issue. Why do you think that decision should be left to the states?
Thank you for the question, Senator. The main reason is geography, right? Like we live on this big round ball, and the sun is moving, and the difference in where each state is makes a big difference in how the sunrise and sunset time applies. And so to say that there is one solution that is exactly right for Texas, and the exact same solution is right for Atlanta, for Georgia, is what I would posit overreach by the federal government. And I might even go back to the example that is often cited about when the time change happened in the 70s, and just to give a little context to why that was such a failure. It's often cited that people didn't like it because there were children that were put at risk in the dark waiting for school. It turns out a lot of that is apocryphal. As we've heard, pedestrians are much safer with more light later in the day. But the thing that is interesting about that time change was, and this shows you how different politics was back in those days, that law was signed into law on December 15th, 1973, right in the middle of Watergate. You could say that maybe it was a distraction from other things that were going on, but it was enacted on December 15th, on a Saturday. It was it took place on January 6th, 1974, about 3 weeks later. So you can imagine the worst Monday of the year already is the one after the holiday break where you have to go back to school and everything. To have an extra hour of sleep robbed away right before that, you can understand why it was so unpopular and why it was repealed 2 months after Nixon resigned office. So it clearly doesn't work for the federal government to come and say, this is a mandate of exactly what we should do for all of the country all at the same time. But it is the place of the Commerce Committee to say, we need a well-regulated time system. And so it makes sense to get rid of the clock changing. And if we give 2 years to the states to be able to say, so that all of these arguments can be hashed out, and they're all valid arguments, but they can be hashed out in the geography of the place where it would actually apply. And they would have time to plan and figure out what is the appropriate time for school to start to take in this evidence from neurologists, and what is the best time for all of the businesses to operate.
So maybe if we had more daylight, the Watergate break-in doesn't happen, and history would be different. Dr. Johnson, you seem to disagree with having states decide on how they should lock the clock. In your judgment, why do you think that would be the wrong approach?
So time is a measure. So Congress has the control over setting measures. I think of my husband, he likes to make a joke. He's 6'6" in the morning and 6'5" in the afternoon. We don't change the length of a foot on his diurnal pattern of his height. Time is supposed to say, you know, how the sun is moving through the sky. And so if we set it to a standard time of the sun being closer to overhead at noon, now that's something we can go by, but states then can decide how they want to set their social schedules. So instead of sort of tricking people into, you know, you all have to get up early no matter what, let's have each state decide when they want their schools to start, when businesses want to start. But let's fix a measure of time that is actually has a meaning where the sun is overhead, and then adjust, you know, the social schedule around it. And that is definitely something the states should decide on.
Thank you. Senator Lujan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you all for being here today. Dr. Johnson, thank you for joining us today. I saw that the American Academy of Neurology sent the committee a letter encouraging us to consider that standard time, not daylight savings time, is the best to align with our body's natural clocks. Many people still sleep through the morning light or after the early sun rises. Does that mean that light is being wasted if they are not using it awake?
So light helps us get up. You know, most people will wake up naturally after light. Now, some people, my teenagers, could easily sleep until noon, and that makes them actually more likely shift their schedules even later. So when you miss morning light, which is needed to reset your rhythm, or if you get too much light in the evenings, you drift later and have even more trouble getting up in the morning. And so that's why if we actually set it so the sun is rising earlier in the morning, more people will actually naturally, because their circadian rhythms start saying get up on time rather than get up so late, will be able to be ready for the day, be able to have their circadian rhythms help their health, help their metabolism, which is going to be good for heart disease, stroke risk, dementia risk, all these other sort of chronic health problems.
I appreciate that. To all the panelists, what does this mean for New Mexico, for our farmers, school children, and teenagers, the elderly, workers in tourism and recreation? What would permanent daylight standard time mean for these communities? One or the other, I apologize, not or. Mr. Yates?
Senator, thank you for the question. New Mexico is another real leader in early movements to try to lock the clock. State Senator Cliff Pirtle worked on this. I worked with him closely for a long time. The effects on everybody in New Mexico of the clock changing is the same, which is it's very disruptive. It's not disruptive equally for everybody, but for a lot of people it is. A lot of, all the things that we've cited, all the different health studies show that. The thing that I've been advocating today about the 2-year implementation period would be especially helpful for New Mexico because you have a tricky little trade region where you abut West Texas, which is in the mountain time zone, and part of Mexico. And so there's a region where interstate commerce is directly affected. And so all of Mexico recently decided to lock the clock, except for the part that is attached to West Texas and New Mexico. And so these issues of commerce are complicated and do take a little while to work out. So that's the one thing I would say is that that sort of thing should be addressed carefully.
Mr. Karin?
I would say that the golf courses in New Mexico, which enjoy mostly afternoon and evening light, all the great hiking that goes on in New Mexico, the rock climbing, the hot air ballooning, all of that would be seriously curbed if daylight saving time was removed. And that would be, I think, a detriment to the New Mexico economy and people's time and ability to get outside and enjoy what you have.
You're suggesting that people hike and golf in the morning?
No, they do all that in the afternoon. And if standard time was made permanent, they would feel forced to do it in the morning, but they have to go to school, they have to go to work, and I don't think they would be able to make that shift.
Appreciate that. Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I would say, if anything, you have a neighboring state, Arizona, that does very well on standard time and has shown that the golf industry can thrive. If anything, a lot of people say, and one of the reasons Arizona says they stayed on standard time is because it gets too hot later. So a lot of people do like to do exercise later, and that often is actually a better time for our health to get our exercise in. So if we can get people up so that they can be more active in the morning and get this exercise and enjoy all the wonderful things like hiking, which I know when I've gone to places like New Mexico, I do in the morning. I think that we can still have all these activities on either time, but I think standard time is the healthier choice.
Dr. Harkey?
So our work was looking at fatality data nationally rather than by individual states, in part due to sample size. But if the patterns hold in New Mexico, just like they have in our research across the country, then we're going to see an offset between the number of motor vehicle occupant deaths that have risen slightly during the time change periods and pedestrian and bicyclist deaths that have decreased slightly during that same time period. And so the net effect is one of really no change when we look at road safety data alone. And so if you're trying to make this decision on the basis of just road safety, I don't think the results of our study are going to point you in one direction or the other.
As a follow-up to that, Dr. Harkey, Dr. Johnson pointed to a study from a professor at Eastern New Mexico University, Jeff Gentry, who showed 20% higher car crashes in locations where sunrises and sunsets are later. Now, I understand your point that darkness is a key measure of accidents, but this data shows me that sleep effects are powerful indicators as well. How do you view the risk of sleep deprivation on accidents versus risks from darkness?
So our study did not look specifically at that particular issue. I know other studies have. Methodologies differ. Most of the studies that have tried to look strictly at that small amount of time change before and after in the crashes concur that the real issue here is the amount of ambient light and the time of day when it occurs, that darkness is the real key, and you just need to make sure that you're providing good safety interventions to address issues of darkness. So whether that is improving technologies in the vehicle, such as headlights, automatic emergency braking, or whether it's you're putting in infrastructure measures that add more lighting, add more space for pedestrians and bicyclists to keep them separated from motorists, whatever you can do to reduce those conflicts in the darkness and improve awareness of other road users in the darkness will be beneficial, regardless of the time change.
It sounds like you support my legislation to require technology be installed in vehicles to prevent impaired crashes. So I'll take that as well. We'll share that with my colleagues. Mr. Chairman, I have one more question for Mr. Yates on standard time versus daylight savings. I'll just submit it into the record. And just to note to the panelists, the reason I'm asking so much about sleep is, as my colleagues know, I suffered a stroke 3 years ago. I've learned a lot about the importance of sleep. I definitely lived my life burning the candle at both ends, and now I do my due diligence to embrace sleep hygiene and all the rest. And so that's bearing a lot into this conversation that I'm having with my constituents and others, Mr. Chairman. So I very much appreciate this hearing, though. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you. Senator Young.
Well, I thank all of you for being here. I'm the senior senator from the state of Indiana, and we have quite a history with daylight savings time. For those of you who have consumed old Parks and Rec episodes, you may have seen the one that focused on this particular topic. But let me walk through some of the things that have transpired in our state, and I'll weave in there some of the unique perspectives that Hoosiers have brought to this. Until 2006, our state was chronologically divided, you might say, with some counties observing daylight savings time and others not. And then in 2006, after years of debate, furious debate, our state decided to become the 48th state to adopt daylight savings time. In central Indiana, on the shortest day of the year, December 21st, the sun currently rises at 8:02 a.m. and sets at 5:23 p.m. Under permanent daylight savings time, sunrise would be delayed until 9:02 a.m., meaning Hoosiers would begin their day in darkness for much of the winter. What works for East Coast states, I'm hearing from many of my constituents, might not work for states like Indiana. We have 12 counties in the western part of the state that are in the central time zone. So Evansville, Indiana, if you're familiar with that. You got up near Chicago, what we call the region affectionately. So there are 80 other counties that are in the eastern time zone. So, you know, this sort of suggests that maybe a one-size-fits-all national policy on time changes doesn't take into account the regional differences that significantly impact daily life. I understand we have a charge, Article 1, Section 8, to facilitate interstate commerce. That was one of the major arguments of facilitating interstate commerce from the state level when we had this debate. So I anticipate we've heard that. I anticipate I'll hear more of that from my colleagues, but that has to be balanced against other considerations, of course. Leaving this decision to the states might allow local leaders who best understand their communities to weigh the specific needs of their residents. States along this line of argument are in a better position to evaluate how changes in daylight hours affect school schedules, commuting patterns, public safety, and economic activity. So I guess to the panel, do you believe that states like Indiana, with their unique cultures and geographical challenges and even histories as it relates to this issue, should have the flexibility to make their own decision, or do you think this decision should be standardized across the country? We'll begin with Mr. Yates, and I'll give everyone an opportunity to speak to that, if you like. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Senator Young, for the question. And I mentioned Indiana in my opening statement because it's a perfect example of why the Commerce Committee needs to approach this carefully, because to impose onto Indiana a solution that is the same as for New York and for New England is not the best interest of the people of Indiana and is a little bit rude. The one thing that I might say, though, is that I've never been to Indiana to testify, but I did go to Michigan to testify about their daylight saving time bill, and I went to Nebraska and to Kansas, which are states like Indiana on the western edge of their time zones and would make the most sense for them to be in standard time, and I advocated for that with the state senators and state representatives in those states, and all of them told me that all of their constituents don't care. They would rather, like they're in the middle of the winter, they're already going to school and going to work in the dark, and they would just like to have a little bit of time after school and after work to be in the light. So I said, okay, this is your state, you get to pick.
Thank you for your response. Mr. Karin.
Well, I'm no constitutional scholar for sure, but I don't see in the Constitution where it says that the federal government regulates time. I don't know if time falls under commerce, so it would naturally fall to the states if the federal government's not empowered to do so.
We have the view that everything falls under Congress.
I appreciate that. I will say, I feel it's less of a state issue than it feels like a personal issue. And the ability to do, for example, to Senator One's comments, I can simulate or practice sleep hygiene whether the sun is up or down, but I can't simulate sun hygiene. I can't light the world when we want to be out there when it's dark, right? And so I think, to me, it comes down to which choice, if you were to land on one, is going to be harder to adjust to. We are already on daylight saving time for 8 months, so we'd have to adjust for 4 months. If you reverse it, then we're adjusting 8 months of our calendar.
Thank you, sir. Dr. Johnson, would you like to say something?
Yeah, I want to talk about the western edge of time zones. States like yours are more aligned with central time zones. So already on standard time, your sun is going to be overhead closer to 1. When we go to daylight savings time, now it's closer to 2. And we see that this really impacts health risks, mental health risks, safety risks, how kids do in school. I want to highlight one Indiana study. When you guys ended going the parts of the state that were on standard time.
Wait, you're coming with a study, you're citing a study? Are we allowed to do that in this? Is that consistent with the rules, Chairman Cruz? I'm kidding, of course.
So when part of Indiana ended standard time and went to seasonal daylight savings time, they found that kids' high school test scores were actually much better when they were on standard time and dropped when they switched to even seasonal daylight savings time. And that's not adding the exponential harms of bringing those 9 a.m. sunrises, like you said. So we would love every place to be more in line with the sun. And as you said, states have different needs to get closer to that ideal.
Thank you, Doctor. Dr. Harkey?
So we didn't have a preference in our study for one time or the other in terms of how you set it. What our study showed was that the risk of fatalities for pedestrians and bicyclists in particular rises at night. And it rises for all motorists as well at night. So the real key is regardless of which decision you make and which time zone you use, you've got to make sure that you're putting interventions in that it's going to help with those who are traveling in those dark hours, whether it is more in the morning or more in the afternoon and evening. That's the real key, and particularly for pedestrians and bicyclists who are the overwhelming number of fatalities that are occurring in those dark hours.
I see. I'm very much over time. I see that Mr. Karin has something he wants to say, so I've been given lead by the chairman. Please, go ahead. Yes,
I just want to point out that Senator Scott's bill, the Sunshine Protection Act, kind of threads the needle. It creates a federal daylight saving time, but allows every state to opt out if they chose. So I think that's maybe the best answer here.
Good point. All right, thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Senator Markey.
Yep, thank you, Mr. Chairman, very much. So it's 1985. It's my 5th term in the United States House of Representatives, and I become the chairman of the Energy Subcommittee on the Energy and Commerce Committee. And searching through the jurisdiction of this wonderful subcommittee is time. I guess somebody's going to have to be chairman over time, and it's me. I'm chairman of time. And nothing had been driving me crazier than the birds chirping, at 5 a.m. in the morning. It's sunshine out. It's the end of April. This is not good. So I began a negotiation with Bill Goodling, who was a Republican from Pennsylvania, to move time. And it was a hard, grudging discussion, but I was able to move it from the end of April to the beginning of April in 1986. And so that changed it, because at that point it was 6 months daylight, 6 months standard. So I was able to claw back 3 weeks, pretty much to right now, okay? Otherwise, we'd still be another 2 or 3 weeks where there's no daylight savings time. Then Congressman Goodling left, and so in 2005, I'm still on the Energy Subcommittee. So with Fred Upton, who was a Republican from Michigan, we cut another deal and we moved it to the beginning of March. And we also said, let's put Halloween in daylight savings time, and so we moved it into the beginning of November. So at that point, I'm at 8 daylight, 4 standard. Okay, so I'm kind of proud of my 2 bills. Changing time, they started to call me the Sun King, which I was, kind of proud of. Because those are big bills, Mr. Chairman. That's moving time. Okay? And the whole world then starts to move to that standard. So, well, we had to stop there. And then 2 years ago, Senator Rubio and I, we had a bill to do daylight savings time year-round, and it passed by unanimous consent out on the floor of the Senate. It was then stalled in the House, never had a vote over it. But I consider this kind of an inexorable march towards more sunshine that people can enjoy, not while they're asleep, having the sun come in early in the morning. So, so that's my goal. My goal is just to make sure people get more sunshine in the evening when they can use it, especially, as I heard your opening statement, Mr. Chairman, as our economy has changed. And we're not an agricultural predominant economy any longer, although farmers play a vital role in our society, but we're more into the economy that we all live in today. So I guess my first question, Mr. Karin, is how would extending evening daylight support small businesses in your industry?
It would add to the golf industry at least $1 billion of economic activity. The average golf course would see an increase in approximately $250,000 in revenue. And now, I mean, that's an economic argument, but the golfers around America, the 30 million golfers, would get to enjoy all of that. So that's the argument.
Right. But it's also true that, let's just go back to 1986, it's hard to start your Little League practices if it's still dark in the evening at the end of April, huh? Kids are still, not going to be allowed out into the dark, or you're playing tennis or walking around. So that change was very important, was it not?
Yes.
In
Yes.
86 and then again in 2000.
My brother happens to be an athletic director at a high school, and he said, we don't like having to spend money on lights for every single activity that happens after school.
Yeah, so would an additional hour of evening sunlight help businesses save money on energy costs from not having to turn the lights on early, much less athletic?
Well, golf, we don't light the golf courses, so it wouldn't be an energy savings for us. It's mostly about a health and economic.
Health and economic, yeah. Mr. Yates, what does your research say about the benefits of ending the switch twice a year between daylight savings time and standard time?
Thank you, Senator, for the question, and I appreciate the nickname that you got. It's better than the nickname that the Comedy Central, The Daily Show, called me the Time Wizard, and so I wasn't sure if I should be offended or.
I'm going to keep Sun King for myself. Okay?
Yeah, Sun King is way better than Time Wizard.
I like that title. Yeah.
The detrimental effects of switching the clocks are super clear, and it seems like we've got pretty much unanimous agreement about that at this point. And what's delightful about it, from my perspective, is to hear you tell these stories, because you clearly have been a pioneer on this for a long time. And what's great is that this has never been at all a partisan issue. It's always been a completely bipartisan issue. When you look at the 24 states that have enacted something to.
And can I say this as well? And opposition has always been bipartisan.
Yeah.
Because I had to negotiate with Representative Goodling who's a Republican, on the other side, but I had a Republican, Carlos Moorhead from Orange County was on my side, a Republican, and I had to negotiate with Larry Craig, who was senator from Idaho. He was the senator before Jim Risch, so I had to negotiate with him on this. He was in opposition, but I had Fred Upton from Michigan, who was a supporter. So it's always been bipartisan on either side, these coalitions that are there. And so that's the only way, from my perspective, that we're going to be able to work here as well in order to make some progress. You know, we just have to make daylight savings time permanent, in my opinion, one way or the other, or at least get more. We need more sunshine, you know? And the reason, Mr. Chairman, it's from my perspective, it just, when the sun's out, it just increases the likelihood that the corners of people's mouths are going to be turned upwards. They're going to be happier when the sun's out. They're going to be feeling good. That's why so many people move to Texas, by the way, and Florida. It's not the politics, it's the sun they're chasing, right? So this is, from my perspective, a universal feeling, right? That when that sun's out and they can go out and enjoy it in the evening, it just makes all the difference in the world to them. And so we have to find a way here of resolving these issues to be able to deal with it. And I know there's disagreements on it, including, I know Karin Johnson's here from Massachusetts, and she's on the other side of the issue, which I respect. So it's just a big conversation that I hope we can resolve, because I just think it's for the benefit of people's happiness, just to have that sunshine available. They can do a lot more in the sunshine in the evening than they can do early in the morning. And I thank you, Mr. Chairman, for the opportunity to be here.
Thank you, Your Majesty. And I will say, I did not know that my friend from Massachusetts had acquired the nickname the Sun King, which the previous Sun King, of course, was King Louis XIV in France, whose best-known statement was "L'État c'est moi," I am the state, which may explain the differences between Senator Markey and myself on the size of government.
Well, I think President Trump is quoting King Louis very favorably.
That's a fair point, since he did in fact tweet out Louis.
Le roi, c'est moi. I think I saw. I didn't know he knew French, but I think he, in fact, did. In fact, quote favorably. Not even as you are. You're doing it with a very high risible coefficient. Okay? You're doing it jokingly. I think he was serious. Although I will say this: I think you gave the president good advice 2 days ago. Acting, we'll call it more like King Louis.
Well, I will note, as you know, I lived 3 years in Massachusetts, and I remember my third year of law school, where it snowed in the month of May, which I thought was positively immoral. And as you noted, the sun is a very good recruiter for the great state of Texas. I'm fond of saying you can't shovel sunshine, and that is a beautiful thing.
I'll give you some news that the winters in Boston are now 6 degrees warmer than they were in 1970 because of climate change. So our ponds don't even freeze over in the winter anymore, much less snowing in May. So maybe kids from Texas going to law school up in Boston now enjoy May a lot more than they used to.
All right, so I'm going to ask a couple more questions, and then we're going to wrap up the hearing. Mr. Karin, give us your best argument why recreational daylight is so important to your members.
My members deliver joy for a living, and they happen to run businesses making that happen. So to them, if they saw more people in the afternoons and the evenings enjoying the outdoors with each other, it's why they get out of bed. It's why they do this. So they'll have better lives as business owners. They'll be able to pay the bills a little bit better and reinvest in their businesses if they had a little bit of a boost more in the afternoons and evenings.
That was helpful, although I will say on the delivering joy, I couldn't help but think of I think the best comedy riff ever done, which is Robin Williams' on golf, which I will note is profane but screamingly funny, and he points out that golf was invented by the Scots and how infuriating it can be at time. And he said, I know, we'll call it a stroke, because when you miss, you want to have a stroke.
Very good.
All right, Dr. Johnson. Would shifting time zones slightly address the concerns for communities that are in dark zone areas if the clock were permanently set on daylight savings times? Does shifting the time zones make a difference?
So we would encourage all states to be within their sort of time zone that is closest to the sun being overhead at noon. So for example, like Indiana being more in the central time zone versus the eastern time zone would help get them more aligned with the sun. But it should be standard time. So there has been a push on the East Coast to have us in Atlantic Standard Time. That is the time set for Bermuda. That is not the time set for any of the East Coast. So, you know, we want permanent standard Eastern time, not permanent standard Atlantic time, which is the exact same as permanent daylight savings time.
Dr. Harkey, what has your research found as it relates to traffic accidents immediately following a time change?
So that's what we were looking at as part of our research, was in that 5-week period before and the 5-week period after the time change. And when we fall back in the fall, vehicle occupant deaths go down about 7%. And when they spring forward, vehicle occupant deaths go up about 12%. And the exact opposite with pedestrian and fatalities. So when we fall back, pedestrian and fatalities rise 13%, and then when we spring forward, they go down 24%. And so the net effect is almost zero between pedestrian and vehicle, pedestrian, bicyclists, and vehicle deaths. And so that's why our research really doesn't come out strongly in favor of either one. But what's clear is that darkness matters. And that's where we do about a quarter of our travel at night, and yet that's when 50% of the vehicle occupant deaths occur, and when more than 3/4 of the pedestrian deaths occur. So regardless of what policy decision is made with regards to the time and where we set the clocks, we have to make sure we're continuing to improve our infrastructure, continuing to improve vehicle technology that will address the safety risk that we have at night in dark conditions.
So you just said darkness mattered, and it occurred to me an alternative title for this hearing, instead of "If We Could Turn Back Time," might have been "Hello Darkness, My Old Friend." All right. Look, this hearing was important, and I wanted to hear all this testimony because I personally struggle with the two choices here, because it's a question of what do you care about more, sunshine and joy and fun and money, or health, mental health, physical health, and the honest answer for most people is, gosh, I care about all that stuff. So that's not an easy trade-off. The alternative that has been suggested is let each state make that decision. And I guess it's been pointed out that Senator Scott's bill does a version of that by picking daylight savings times, but then letting states opt out. Let me ask, as a practical matter, does that work? Functionally, how confusing is that, having everyone pick different times? How does that work for commerce, for life, for knowing what the hell time it is? Let me have each of you answer that.
Senator Cruz, thank you for that. The one little part of Senator Markey's history about when they changed the time in November was that the proposal was to move daylight saving time to finish at the end of November, and the airlines came back and said, no, we don't want a time change in the middle of our busiest travel season. And so they were going to scrap that, and then they got the extra week to put it in. So time is always complicated, and the system that we have, the system that we have is complicated, but it's complicated because it is a human creation, right? The sun moving around the earth doesn't actually have anything to do with time. Time is the agreement that we have about what 10 o'clock means, because we don't want to go around saying, you know, the committee hearing will start when the sun is 2 hands above the horizon. We need this system. But the system has this bug right now, and the bug is daylight saving time. It's the switching of the clocks. And so if we have a little bit of time, a couple of years, so that the individual states can address all of these complexities and make those decisions, then we will be able to get rid of this bug permanently. It's something that we've been stuck with since World War I, and this is our opportunity to finally fix it.
Mr. Karin?
I'm not going to say that government solutions cause more confusion, but you can imagine in this scenario that Florida is on daylight saving time, Georgia right above it's on standard, South Carolina is on daylight, et cetera, in the same spot because maybe special interests of all kinds made that happen. So I already have problems remembering which state is in which time zone as it is right now, sometimes the border states. To add to that, oh, they're in central and they're on standard. Oh, what time is it there exactly? So I can see where this causes more confusion. Wish I had a better answer for you on that one, but could we adjust and figure that out quickly? I don't know. I see it as problematic, but it may be the only way to thread the needle.
Dr. Johnson?
Yeah, I think, the economy, the transportation industry certainly needs consistency and alignment. So we want to make this change once. We don't want to pick something that's tried and been failed twice before, such that we spend lots of money fixing it again in a few years. You mentioned the economy, which again, is so important. And, the majority of our workers start work early. The average work start time is 7:55 in the morning. So we'd be forcing people all winter to go to work in the dark, really affecting their productivity and economics. And so while, certain businesses are gonna have different, benefits of the sun, I actually do want to give sun to people when they use it to get up, when they use it to be healthy, when they use it to be more productive and efficient at work, and to improve the overall economy, not just niche businesses like the golf industry that have shown they can be very successful in standard time, like in Arizona.
Dr. Harkey?
Strictly speaking, from a road safety perspective, I'm not sure it would make any difference if states had the right to select the time, because it's about the amount of light, the amount of ambient light during the times of travel. And so I don't think it would have an impact. Personally, it would probably confuse me, but we had that problem. I will give you a quick anecdote. Almost 40 years ago, we were collecting speed data in New Mexico and Arizona as part of a research study. Had no idea at that time, being right out of school, hadn't really paid attention, that Arizona did not bother to go to daylight savings times. And all of our equipment was an hour off when we went to pick up all the speed data, and we had to adjust it after the fact. And so I think you would have those kinds of things, right, that could work their way into the system, unintentional mistakes, if we were to get into a system where we had a lot of different time zones going on.
Well, I for one, am thankful for these magic devices that we carry, that when I land on a plane, I look down to figure out what time it is, because I'm on a lot of planes and it changes. I want to thank each of the four of you. This has been very helpful testimony, and you all have different perspectives, so each of you has added significantly to it. Senators will have until the close of business on Thursday, April 17th to submit questions for the record. The witnesses will have until the end of the day on Thursday, May 1st to respond to those questions. And this concludes today's hearing. The committee stands adjourned.